Florida Senator Bill Nelson is in the fight of his life against Republican Governor Rick Scott. On this final day ahead of the midterm election, he's sticking to an old school method of campaigning, sign waving on street corners. That's a tradition that dates back to 1972. Our Washington Bureau reporter, Samantha-Jo was with the senator today as he waved to voters. So, Samantha-Jo, I'm curious, what was the reaction like from people?
Well, Sharon, the senator certainly got a lot more honks right here in Orlando than he did in Melbourne, a region that typically leans red.
All right.
From a street corner in Orlando to a median in Melbourne, you'll find three-term incumbent Senator Bill Nelson sticking with a 40-plus year tradition.
I'm the first one to have ever done it. Thank you.
All these years later, Florida's senior senator says he's perfected the art of sign holding.
I can turn each direction that the traffic is going.
And he's got all the tools he needs.
My telescoping boat pole that gets up high and I don't have to hold it.
Nelson's been doing this since 1972, and he's even wearing the same boots.
I'd go to every door, knocking on doors, and those boots that are kind of worn now.
The senator doesn't have any big rallies planned less than 24 hours until the polls open, like his opponent, Governor Rick Scott. But after crisscrossing the state for the last few weeks, he says he's already put in the hard work.
Of that group that will vote tomorrow, a lot of their minds already made up.
In a number of recent polls, Nelson is clinging to a slim lead against his Republican challenger, typically within the margin of error. The 76-year-old acknowledges this could be in part because of the excitement surrounding gubernatorial candidate Andrew Gillum.
Andrew and I have appeared together on a number of rallies, and he helps me and I help him.
And while the veteran Democrat has never faced an opponent quite like Rick Scott,
Thank you, sir.
he says he'll continue to campaign the way he believes works best.
Because they like to see a candidate coming out there with the people asking directly for their votes.
Now, the senator tells me that if things go his way tomorrow night, he'll be right back out here on Wednesday morning with a different sign, one that says thank you. For now, we're live in Orlando. Samantha-Jo, Spectrum News 13.
Spectrum News 13, Samantha-Jo Roth is live in Pinellas County. Samantha-Jo, Senator Nelson campaigning in downtown Tampa, one of the regions hardest hit by the red tide.
Well, Beth, Senator Bill Nelson highlighted Florida's growing environmental problems at a roundtable event with voters in downtown Tampa. This as Governor Rick Scott directed $3 million to Pinellas County to combat this crisis, bringing that total amount of funding to $6.3 million.
I'm a mom, and I have two kids that I am very concerned about their future.
It was Florida's beautiful shorelines that initially attracted Melissa Baldwin to relocate to the Sunshine State. Now the deadly red tide is affecting her family's quality of life, and she believes one person responsible.
Rick Scott really, he's red tide Rick.
The ongoing algae crisis is getting tangled with this year's campaign season. Senator Bill Nelson blames Governor Rick Scott.
The fact that for 8 years he has savaged the environment, that he has starved the water management districts of money.
Scott faults Nelson for not doing more to solve the problem, since Lake Okeechobee water levels are managed by the federal government.
What's frustrating to me is the federal government, Bill Nelson ran an ad in 1990, said he was going to deal with it. He has done nothing, absolutely nothing, to get us funding to fix the dike.
That project now approved. President Trump signing a water bill into law. But voters want to know what took so long.
Nelson's been there a long time, and this problem's been with us for a long time. Scott's more of a newcomer to the political scene.
Now, in the final days of this race, polling is just showing this race is too close to call. Senator Bill Nelson believes that it'll be Scott's environmental record that ultimately will turn the tide, but it could be voters in this key swing county that have seen this crisis up close that could have the final word. We're live in Pinellas County tonight. Samantha-Jo, Spectrum News 13. Well, Beth, recent polling shows that health care is among one of the top issues for voters. A recent survey by the Kaiser Health Foundation found that nearly 7 in 10 Floridians support protecting those with pre-existing conditions, even if it means that healthy people may have to pay more.
Health care is the #1 issue. If I don't have my health, I don't have my life.
Veteran Lauren Wright has a hereditary blood disorder, a pre-existing condition.
That pre-existing condition stays with me at all time. And if I lose my Medicare, I wouldn't be able to do anything else.
Elections have consequences.
Senator Bill Nelson is warning this group of Jacksonville voters that Republicans could endanger protections for pre-existing conditions.
There are 8 million people in Florida that have a pre-existing condition.
I support forcing insurance companies to cover pre-existing conditions.
In an ad released this month, Governor Rick Scott declared his support for protecting pre-existing conditions. He's one of many GOP candidates this cycle taking this approach, despite the fact that congressional Republicans voted time and again to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Senator Bill Nelson says he's skeptical of his opponent's position.
He's tried to repeal the law for the last 7 years. He's done everything that he can to undermine it, and then allows the state of Florida to sue to declare that provision of the law unconstitutional.
The senator making his case to these Duval County voters, a county that usually swings red, though it went for Obama in 2000. The African-American population here is 30%, a minority disproportionately affected by chronic conditions.
With this disorder, it affects my liver, it affects my heart, it affects my lungs.
Now, a spokeswoman for the governor's Senate campaign tells me that Florida is involved in this multi-state lawsuit seeking to overturn Obamacare, and that is happening because Attorney General Pam Bondi is actually suing without any of the governor's input. And obviously, this is an issue that we will hear more about as the days go on. For now, we're reporting live in Jacksonville. Samantha-Jo, Spectra, News 13.
And in the final stretch of the race for Florida's U.S. Senate seat, which candidate can claim the credit for the reinvigorated Cape and will continue to grow the Sunshine State's role in transforming the space industry in the future? Well, our Washington, D.C. Bureau reporter Samantha-Jo filed this report.
That was really reassuring.
Senator Bill Nelson, along with former NASA Administrator Charles Bolden, reminiscing on their experiences on the Space Shuttle Columbia's mission in 1986, sitting down with us at Grill's restaurant in Port Canaveral.
The Cape has come alive. The economic activity and spin-offs is very obvious.
Private employers here creating thousands of jobs in aerospace and other high technology industries in the years since the retirement of the shuttle.
From the day I took the oath in the military to when I flew in space.
Perhaps no one in Congress is more closely identified with the space program than Nelson, who is one of 2 people to fly in orbit as a sitting member of Congress. He's also the top Democrat on the committee that sets NASA policy, something Bolden says the state can't afford to lose.
Power on the Hill comes with time on the Hill and seniority in committees.
But those in the space industry say the area's redevelopment is a team effort. Under Governor Rick Scott's watch, Space Florida helped attract aerospace and defense jobs.
Well, Rick Scott's done a wonderful job for this state.
Some voters like Lynn Miller believe it's Scott who has done most of the heavy lifting in this area. Brevard County is expected to be a contested battleground this cycle. It's a county that has supported the GOP presidential candidate generally by overwhelming margins in every race since 1980. But it's also where Nelson grew up and where he served as a congressman for 12 years.
I really encourage everybody this election time to vote. Very, very important. More important than any year before.
Now, voters in 21 of the state's 67 counties voted for Senator Bill Nelson in his re-election bid back in 2012, but those same voters also voted for President Trump back in 2016. Now, the senior senator from Florida has won Brevard County in all of his past 3 re-election bids. However, it has been by relatively small margins. We'll continue to keep an eye on this county on election night. For now, reporting live in Brevard County.
Our Washington Bureau reporter, Samantha-Jo Roth, joins us now in studio, and you've been following the Senate race on the ground the last week. So what are you seeing?
Well, Sharon, the majority of voters that I spoke with today really told me that they had already cast their ballot and they voted early. The big question is, who will they vote for? In the heart of the Puerto Rican community, I found Hurricane Maria evacuees have mixed opinions when it comes to supporting Senator Bill Nelson or Governor Rick Scott.
Show up and vote in people who represent our lives.
A surge of political star power, making a final push to get the Hispanic community to the polls.
Necesito su voto.
Senator Bill Nelson is working to appeal to this group. His fate ultimately could be decided by the state's exploding Puerto Rican population, who moved to the state in the wake of Hurricane Maria.
I went to the ER one night, and 2 people died next to me that night. Imagine.
Yvette Alsina, a Puerto Rican evacuee, says she couldn't stomach voting for Republicans after the president rejected the death toll from Hurricane Maria. She voted for Senator Bill Nelson over Governor Rick Scott, in part because she felt the governor's outreach was not genuine.
So he knew that we're going to give a real vote in here, so he needs us. I think that was he went to Puerto Rico 8 times. All right, but do what? Like Donald Trump, throw me paper towel? Why?
Puerto Rico Governor Ricardo Rosselló endorsed Senator Bill Nelson at a news conference a month ago, but not everyone here is convinced.
When I vote, I take few Democrat and Republican, both.
Hurricane Maria evacuee Yolanda Paulino says Governor Rick Scott has helped her most in her transition to Florida.
He helped the person that comes from Puerto Rico. And I take an English class in Valencia College because he gives the money to help us. And we don't have to pay nothing.
With 2 days out, this nationally watched race is still a virtual toss-up.
Yeah, Nelson Rick Scott's going to be the tough one because everybody's waiting on that one. That's the one that they're up, they're down. They're up, they're down. And then they're tied, they're tied, they're tied. Now they're just saying they're tied again. So that's going to be the one.
Now, Latinos make up 17% of registered voters right here in Florida. These votes are crucial, especially in such a tight race. In the studio, Samantha-Jo Roth, Spectrum News 13.